Gamers of Reddit, what is your favorite memory of all time related to playing video games? Story 1. In high school, we would pass out PC games on a USB, handing them out like they were drugs or contraband. It was a huge thrill when we would trick the teachers into thinking we were working, when in face we were either playing Halo Counter-Strike or Battlefield 1942. There were even occasions of free time when an entire class would play together in one giant LAN party, usually around plus 20 of us. Story 2. Christmas of 1999. I got a PlayStation with Crash Bandicoot 3, but no memory card. The next day, my mom took me to Toys R Us. Still have no idea why we went there instead of the local Best Buy, Funkaland, or EB Games to get a memory card so I could continue play. Well, greatest hits games were on sale, and I had just enough money for Final Fantasy VII. During the years prior, I would get magazines about video games while I lived overseas and fantasize about all of the amazing games I couldn't afford or just didn't have access to. The magazines I was reading, then rereading, it was the 90s and I didn't have a lot of money or internet, went absolutely nuts over the game. I didn't understand what an RPG was or why FMVs were so amazing. They were calling cutscenes FMVs because they just didn't have a term for them yet, but I was really interested. My mom let me buy the game with the money I had left from buying people presents and played the game immediately when I got home. The game was life-changing for me. I loved video games but sucked at them. Most were way too frustrating. I could take this one slow though. The characters were cool and there was reading. There was a story. You could do all of these really cool things that I just didn't know were possible in a video game. It was the 90s, I was a kid. We had no internet. There weren't a lot of kids in the neighborhood to play with. My parents didn't allow other kids in our house, and I wasn't allowed to go to other people's houses. Both my parents had full-time jobs with tough commutes where I didn't see either of them between the hours of 7 and 6, and we were living in a townhouse we could barely afford in the middle of an extremely steep hill next to an extremely busy road. I was by myself, and I finally had a magical world I could escape to. A world that treated me as an adult. I didn't feel alone anymore. While I played games prior, just Mario Kart, Star Fox, and Pokémon, Final Fantasy VII was the game that tipped the scales and made me love video games. Since I'm generally excluded from Christmas celebrations, I actually started a private holiday that I celebrated every year on the 26th of December. I didn't have a name for it, but every year I'd either play a new RPG or run out and buy the one I was hoping to get for Christmas, all to commemorate playing Final Fantasy VI for the first time. I celebrated it every year until Christmas 2014, when I visited my wife's, then girlfriend, family for the first time. It was a bittersweet holiday to leave behind. It had been the most important and savored day throughout every year since 1999, but I no longer needed it. I no longer felt the loneliness that Final Fantasy VII helped me cope with. I still have it sitting on a shelf next to my desk, green-backed jeweled case, manual and all. Story 3. I had a good time with Halo 3 playing through Legendary with my brother and 2 friends. The peak of my Halo experience was in an oddball match though. I had the skull and was in the lead by quite a bit. I had ducked into a clear corridor while the other players were still far behind. I was going to crouch walk a bit to fool their motion sensors when a red blip came up on my own sensor. It was moving to cut off my escape. I had a crazy idea. The opening that the enemy would come from was too far away to reach with the skull's one-hit melee, so I stopped and waited. When my pursuer came into view, I threw him the skull and started backpedaling. He was able to get one shot off before losing the ability to fire from automatically picking the skull up. I, however, was free to pull out my battle rifle and put him down quickly. I picked the skull back off his body and escaped for the win. Never could replicate that. Story 4. My mom playing Tomb Raider. My PlayStation 1 was my first console as a kid, and I would play it every moment I possibly could. I'm an only child, and my mom was a single parent, so all of my excitement and stories from my games were unloaded on her day after day. Generally, she would listen if she wasn't busy, and would engage me if I was being coherent enough in my explanations, but she was by no means a gamer, so there was a bit of a disconnect. Then, out of the blue, I find her in my game room, the garage, playing Tomb Raider, which confused me because she never expressed any interest in playing games before that moment. I sat down and watched her play and saw how much she got into it, even though she had a hard time because she never really played video games. She eventually beat both the first and second games entirely by herself. These days due partially to her getting older, and also the complexity of the games as the series went on. She can't play them anymore, but every time I get a new one I play it with her because I know she still likes it, and reliving the experience of Tomb Raider with her again, even though the roles are reversed, makes me happy. Story 5. My favorite moments gaming are probably from the summers in middle and high school. Me and my best friend would hang out pretty much every day. We'd go to the mall and chill for a few hours and talk about life and shit, then buy a random co-op PlayStation 2 game or some shit, as well as some 2 liters of Mountain Dew and 2 Monster energy drinks, of course. We would then stay up for like 2 days straight more or less and beat that game. Then go back to playing Smash Bros. Melee for a few weeks until we decide to beat some other random game. I don't miss school, but I do miss summer. Having no obligations for 3 months a year sounds like a utopian dream. Story 6. I remember in Knights of the Old Republic 2, near the end when you gather all the Jedi Masters. That scene turned the perception I had about the Jedi and even my character on its head. Made me rethink everything my character did in that game. What really got me was that they were right. I didn't really appreciate that dialogue as a kid, but when I got to that scene again as an adult, man, it blew me away. That game, its writing, was way ahead of its time and has added more to the franchise than the last 2 movies had. Story 7. When I was around 7 years old, my friend's dad worked as an IT teacher in local high school. He would take us, our childhood group of friends, my friend's hockey teammates. There were usually 8 to 15 of us, with him every Sunday after lunch to school, and while he was doing his teacher stuff, he let us in the IT classroom to play. Now, mind you, computers were really rare to have at home at the time, so it was a big deal. We would play Half-Life, Counter-Strike, Atomic Bomberman on LAN, battling each other for hours straight until evening. It was awesome and went on for a few years. I have many great memories because of my friend's dad. Thank you. What is even better is that a few years ago, we made this happen again. At least once in a year, we get our laptops, meet at someone's house, and play for at least 12 hours. Half-Life, Quake 3 Arena, Atomic Bomberman, Serious Sam, Flatout. In every game, we have a tournament. It doesn't matter that my friends have work tomorrow, are CEOs of a multimillion companies, are studying for doctorate exams. It doesn't matter that each of us have to drive for hours to meet and play. Once in a year, you just have to. You want to. Story 8. 100% summer breaks staying up playing games all night with my best friends in my teens. I'm only 22 now and still play with a lot of them, but there was just something about it that makes me incredibly happy and sad to remember it, because it'll never happen again. Halo 3 Customs, Modern Warfare 2, WoW Marathons, and any other game we could find to play all night. We would basically use whatever game we played as an excuse to talk and joke for as long as we could stay awake. People talk about how people waste their time in childhoods playing games, but I don't think anything I'd done would have made me as happy and made me laugh as much as those summers. It was never about the games, really. It was about being at an age where me and my friends all had the time to do nothing together like that. Now the most we can do is find time to play a game of League or something together once a week, sadly. Growing up fucking sucks.